Police officer humiliates fat woman without knowing that she is the wife of the chief deputy who fired everyone. The patrol car came to a violent stop on Main Street, right in the center of Riverside, and Officer Derek Martinez got out of the car with the look of someone who had already decided that someone was going to get screwed today. It was a hot July afternoon, the kind that makes the asphalt shine, and he was in a terrible mood. He had just argued with the sergeant, got scolded for being late with the paperwork, and now he needed to take it out on someone. And then he saw her, a plus-size woman in her 40s, brown hair tied into a simple bun, sweating as she carried 3 shopping bags toward the parking lot. She wore a low-key floral dress and scuffed sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing threatening, but Derek didn't need a reason. He had the badge, and that, in his mind, was enough. "Hey, you!" he shouted, crossing the street with long, authoritative strides. "Stop it!" The woman stopped, confused, looking around as if she thought he was talking to someone else. But Derek was already in front of her, chest puffed out, hand on his belt where his gun rested. "With myself. Where did you steal those bags?" She blinked in disbelief. "Sorry? You heard me. Those purchases. Where's the receipt?" The woman took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Her name was Helena Ferreira, daughter of immigrants, raised in a working-class neighborhood, graduated in law after years of studying at night. Today, at 42, she was a successful corporate lawyer, but Derek didn't know that. To him, she was just another fat suspect that he could intimidate without consequences. "Officer, I just left the store. The notes are inside. Open the bags. Now." Pedestrians started to stop. Some took out their cell phones. Helena felt the blush rise to her face, not from embarrassment but from controlled anger. She knew that guy. I knew it well. But today she was tired. Tired of being judged by my body. Tired of being treated like a criminal just for existing in public. Still, he opened the bags calmly. Fruits, wholemeal bread, milk, cleaning products, all with a visible price tag. Derek didn't even look properly. He wanted humiliation, not truth. "And that cell phone in your pocket? Let me see his note too." "It's my cell phone, officer. I bought it." "I decide what is yours," he bellowed, and now there was a small crowd watching. "Do you think I'm stupid? People like you always have something wrong. Turn your back, hands on the wall." Helena was paralyzed. The bags slipped from their hands and fell to the floor. Oranges rolled across the asphalt. And in that moment, something inside her clicked. She didn't turn away. Instead, he looked Derek in the eye for the first time. A firm look, calm, dangerous. "Officer Martinez," she said, reading the name on his badge. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Derek sneered. "Threatening a police officer now? Do you want to go to real arrest?" Helena didn't respond. He just took his cell phone out of his pocket, unlocked it with his face, and started dialing a number. Derek violently snatched the phone from her hand. "I don't think so, fatty. You'll learn to respect the law." He threw his cell phone on the floor. The screen cracked. The crowd gasped, and Helena, for the first time in years, felt tears of fury burn her eyes. But she didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of that man. Because what Derek didn't know, what no one there knew, was that the number Helena was dialing was her husband's, and her husband was Richard Ferreira, the new chief deputy of the Riverside Police Department, the man who, in exactly 48 hours, would turn that district upside down. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will leave you speechless. Derek handcuffed Helena right there, in front of everyone. She didn't resist. He didn't scream. He just let him press the too cold metal around his wrists, while the July sun burned the back of his neck and people filmed in silence. Some shook their heads, indignant. Others looked away, embarrassed by others. But no one intervened. They never intervene. "You're going to learn not to defy authority," Derek said, pushing Helena toward the squad car. She stumbled, and he didn't even try to support her, just laughed. A low, venomous laugh, the kind that comes out of the mouth of someone who has never been held responsible for anything in their life. When Helena was placed in the back seat of the vehicle, the shopping bags were still scattered on the floor. Nobody caught it. Nobody helped. And Derek? He got into the car whistling as if he had just arrested a dangerous criminal. The Riverside police station was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity. Helena remained silent the entire journey, looking out the window as the city passed by in a blur. She knew that police station. I knew it well. I've been there dozens of times in the last 6 months since Richard took over as chief deputy. But today, for the first time, she was walking through the wrong door. When they arrived, Derek dragged her inside like she was a trophy. The reception was full. Police officers, interns, some victims waiting for treatment. Everyone looked, and Derek made a point of announcing loudly, "Another one who thought she could defy the police. Let's see if she learns anything after a few hours in the cell." Helena kept her head up, but inside, her heart was pounding. not out of fear, of anger, pure, uncontrollable rage, the kind that burns slowly and explodes without warning. Derek took her to the processing room and threw her onto a broken plastic chair. She almost fell. He didn't even notice, too busy typing on the computer with 2 fingers, making typos every 3rd word. Full name, he ordered, without looking at her. Helena Maria Ferreira. Profession, corporate lawyer. Derek stopped typing. He looked at her with that sarcastic smile again. Lawyer? Of course. Everyone is a lawyer when they are arrested, right? He shook his head, laughing to himself. Okay. And I'm an astronaut in my spare time. Helena took a deep breath. She could feel her blood boiling, but she knew that any wrong word now would only make it worse. Then she was quiet. Quiet, but attentive, observing everything. The names on the uniforms, the cameras in the corners, protocol being violated every second. Derek continued the fake interrogation, asking absurd questions, writing down wrong answers on purpose. When he finished, he threw a crumpled sheet of paper in front of her. Sign there. Helena read quickly. It was a false confession of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. She hadn't even resisted. He knew. She knew. But there, in that room, the truth didn't matter. I'm not signing this, she said, pushing the paper back. Derek leaned his body over the table, his face inches from hers. Do you think you have a choice? Helena held his gaze, firm, unshakable. I always have a choice. For a second, something flashed across Derek's face, a flicker of doubt, but he shook the feeling away with a slap on the table. Take her to cell 3. Let her think for a while. A younger officer, Officer Carter, appeared at the door. He hesitated when he saw Helena, as if something didn't make sense, but he obeyed. As he led her down the hall, Helena noticed he was nervous, sweating, avoiding looking at her. Do you know Chief Deputy Ferreira? She asked softly as they walked. Carter gasped. He stopped walking for a moment. Everyone does, he murmured, almost a whisper of dread. Helena smiled, just a little bit, enough for him to notice. Great, she said, because he's going to meet you too, very soon. Carter went pale. Cell 3 was small, dirty, stinking of mold and old disinfectant. Helena entered and sat on the concrete bench, her back straight, her hands still cuffed. 2 hours passed. Nobody came, no calls allowed, no lawyer, completely ignored protocol. But Helena wasn't worried, because outside, just 5 blocks away, Richard Ferreira was finishing a meeting with the mayor. And when he checked his cell phone and saw 17 missed calls from his wife, his face changed. He called back, P.O. Box, called again, nothing. And then he opened the tracker they both had installed for mutual safety. The red dot flashed on the map, Riverside Police Station, detention cell. Richard was frozen for a full 3 seconds. Then without a word, he got up from his chair, picked up his coat, and left the office with an expression that no one had seen before. Cold, calculated, lethal. Meanwhile, back at the station, Derek was in the break room laughing with other officers, telling the story of the arrogant fat lady he had arrested. She said she was a lawyer. He laughed, banging the table, as if anyone would hire that for anything. The others laughed too. Everyone except Carter, who was leaning against the wall, biting his nails with a horrible feeling growing in his chest. And then the police station door opened, and Richard Ferreira entered. Tall, broad shoulders, impeccable suit, set jaw. He didn't scream. It didn't need to. His presence was enough. The entire hall instantly fell silent. Derek, who had his back turned, still laughing, only noticed when one of his colleagues turned white and whispered, "Man, the chief deputy." Derek turned, and he saw it. Richard stopped in the middle of the hallway, eyes fixed on him. It didn't blink. It didn't deviate. He just said, in a calm voice that echoed like a gunshot, "Where is my wife?" And at that moment, Derek Martinez understood that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The silence that took over the police station was the kind that precedes storms. Derek felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His mouth went dry. The hands, they began to tremble. He knew Chief Deputy Ferreira by name, from meetings, from orders that came from above, but I had never been face to face with him, and he definitely never imagined that the arrogant fat woman he threw in the cell was his wife. Richard didn't repeat the question. It didn't need to. His eyes said it all. He walked steadily down the hall, and every officer who had been laughing 2 minutes ago was now glued to the wall, trying to disappear. Carter, the young police officer who took Helena to the cell, stepped forward, swallowing hard. "Sir, she's in cell 3. Can I get out of the way?" Richard cut in without raising his voice, but the tone was razor sharp. He walked right past Derek, who was frozen in place, and headed down the hallway. 2 detectives who were near the coffee machine moved away, as if Richard carried a contagious disease. He opened the door to the detention wing with such force that he hit the wall, and there was Helena, sitting on the concrete bench handcuffed, loose hair falling in her face, dress rumpled. But when she looked up and saw her husband, there were no tears. There was fire. Richard stopped at the railing, his hands shaking with rage. "Who did this to you?" Helena stood up slowly, walked to the railing and held his hands through the bars. "Officer Derek Martinez," she said, her voice still firm but carrying something dangerous. "He stopped me on the street for no reason. He accused me of robbery. He broke my cell phone. He handcuffed me in front of everyone. And he threw me here without the right to a phone call, without a lawyer, without anything." Richard closed his eyes for a second, taking a deep breath. When it opened, a decision had been made. He turned to the police officer who was following him and simply said, "Open this cell, now." The door opened with a metallic click. Richard entered, removed Helena's handcuffs with his own hands, and pulled her into a tight hug. For a moment, everything stopped, and in that hug, Helena finally let a tear escape. Just one, because she knew that what came next was no time for crying. It was time for justice. When they left the cell, Derek was still in the hallway, pale, sweating cold. He tried to open his mouth, but Richard raised his hand. "Don't talk, not a word." Richard walked straight past him, taking Helena by the hand, and entered the district captain's office. He knocked on the door. 15 minutes later, the door opened, and Richard came out with an even darker expression. "Captain Reynolds," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Immediate suspension. No pay. You have 24 hours to present your defense for administrative negligence." The captain, a 50-year-old man who thought he was untouchable, turned purple. "You can't." "I can, and I just did." Next, Richard turned to Derek, who was now visibly shaking. "Officer Martinez, you are on forced administrative leave, effective immediately. Badge and gun, now." Derek tried to protest, but the words died in his throat. With shaking hands, he took out his badge and placed it on the table along with the gun. It seemed smaller now, weak, pathetic. Richard looked around at all the police officers who were watching. "Does anyone else want to tell me they thought what happened today was funny?" Nobody said anything. "Good, because over the next few days I'm going to review every report, every arrest, every complaint made against this district over the last 6 months. And if I find one more case of abuse, one more injustice, one more humiliation, you will know the meaning of accountability." He took Helena's hand and left the police station without looking back. That night in their home, a discreet townhouse on the outskirts of Riverside, Helena was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of tea in her hands. Richard was on the phone in the next room, and she could hear his low but steady conversation with the Internal Affairs Department. When he returned, he sat next to her and held her hand. "Internal Affairs will open a full investigation into Derek, and I've already requested a review of all the arrests he's made in the last year." Helena nodded, but her face was distant, thoughtful. "That's not enough," she said. Richard looked at her, confused. "Suspension? Investigation? Possible dismissal? What more do you want?" Helena turned to him, and there was something new in her eyes. Determination. "I want him to understand what he did. I want everyone to understand, not just him, the entire system." Richard frowned. "What are you thinking?" Helena picked up the broken cell phone on the table. The cracked screen still showed notifications. She smiled, a small but deadly smile. "I'm going to sue, not just him, the entire department, for violation of civil rights, abuse of authority, illegal arrest, and moral damages." Richard was silent for a moment. Then slowly, he started to smile too. "You know this is going to turn into a war, right?" Helena nodded. "I know, but this time they chose the wrong lawyer to humiliate." Meanwhile, across town, Derek was sitting on the living room couch, beer in hand, trying to process the disaster that had become his life. He had called 3 lawyers. None wanted to take the case. They all said the same thing. "You arrested the chief deputy's wife? Dude, you're alone in this." He threw his cell phone on the couch and ran his hands over his face. How had he been so stupid? So arrogant? The doorbell rang. Derek crawled to the door and opened it. It was a messenger, with a large envelope in his hands. "Derek Martinez?" "Yes. Court notice. Sign here." Derek signed without thinking, took the envelope and closed the door. When he opened it and read the first few lines, his legs almost gave out. "Helena Maria Ferreira vs. Derek Martinez and Riverside Police Department. Civil action for moral damage, abuse of authority and violation of constitutional rights." The share price was just below $2 million. Derek sat on the floor, the paper shaking in his hands, and outside at the corporate law firm where Helena worked, she was in a meeting with the firm's 3 best litigation lawyers. They analyzed every frame of the video that pedestrians had recorded, every witness, every protocol violated. One of the lawyers, a gray-haired man named Thomas, looked at Helena with genuine respect. "This is going to be the biggest action against the department in a decade. Are you sure?" Helena didn't hesitate. "Absolute," Thomas smiled. "Then let's destroy them." And while the legal team was putting the case together brick by brick, Richard, in his office at the Central Police Station, was doing something equally devastating. He called for a full internal audit. Every report from Derek for the last 3 years, every arrest, every complaint filed, and what he found was worse than he imagined. 17 cases of documented abuse, 8 formal complaints ignored, 3 illegal arrests, and all of them involved marginalized people, black women, immigrants, fat people, homeless people. Richard closed the folder tightly. Derek Martinez wasn't just a bad cop, he was a predator, and now he was going to pay for every life he ruined. 3 weeks later, the federal courtroom was packed. Journalists, activists, off-duty police officers, curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had the courage to sue the entire police department. And when Helena walked in, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, hair tied into an elegant bun, she didn't look away from anyone. He walked straight to the defense table, greeted his team, and sat down with his spine straight. Across the room, Derek Martinez was unrecognizable. Unshaven, ill-fitting cheap suit, shaky hands. Beside him, 2 police union lawyers leafed through papers with an air of anticipatory defeat. They knew. Everyone knew. That case was lost before it even started. Judge Marshall, a 60-year-old black man with a ruthless reputation, banged the gavel. Case number 2473, Helena Maria Ferreira vs. Derek Martinez and Riverside Police Department. Let it begin. Thomas, Helena's lead lawyer, stood up and got straight to the point. No beating around the bush. He showed the videos recorded by pedestrians on the court's giant screen. Everyone watched in silence as Derek screamed at Helena, grabbed the cell phone out of her hand, and threw it on the floor. The image of the screen cracking echoed through the room like a gunshot. Then the witnesses came. The first was the owner of the store where Helena shopped. "She's been a customer for years," the lady said, voice firm, polite, punctual, always pays on time. "When I saw what they did to her on the street, I was disgusted." The second witness was Carter, the young police officer who took Helena to the cell. He was sweating, but he spoke the truth. He didn't follow any protocol. There was no probable cause. There was no resistance. He just wanted to humiliate her. Derek's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off halfway through the sentence. Objection denied. Continue. And then came the moment that changed everything. Thomas called Richard Ferreira to the witness stand. The entire room held its breath. The chief deputy went up, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with the same controlled expression he wore when commanding operations. But when he started to speak, there was something different in his voice, something personal. "I've known my wife for 18 years, Richard began, looking directly at Derek. "She is the most honest person I have ever met. She worked 3 jobs to pay for college. She worked at one of the most competitive offices in the country, and yet, she was treated like a criminal on the street. Without reason, without respect, without humanity." He paused, took a deep breath, and when I looked into Officer Martinez's background, I discovered that my wife wasn't the first. She was the 10th, the 7th. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Thomas held up a thick folder. "Your Honor, I would like to present as evidence 17 documented reports of abusive conduct by Officer Martinez over the past 3 years. All filed, all ignored, all involving minorities, immigrants, fat and marginalized people." Derek slumped in his chair. His lawyer tried to protest, but he had no argument. The documents were there, stamped, signed, irrefutable. Judge Marshall leafed through the papers in silence. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked directly at Derek. "Officer Martinez, get up." Derek stood up with difficulty, legs wobbling. "In my 30-year career, I've seen a lot in this court, but rarely have I seen such a clear case of abuse of power, systematic bias, and institutional cowardice." The judge paused. "You don't deserve to wear a badge. You don't deserve public trust, and you definitely don't deserve mercy." Derek tried to speak, but his voice came out as a broken whisper. I was just doing my job." "No!" the judge exploded, slamming his gavel hard. "Your job was to protect and serve, and you chose to humiliate and oppress. That's not police. That's tyranny." The room was completely silent. The judge turned to Helena. "Ms. Ferreira, the court rules in your favor. Moral, emotional, and punitive damages. $2 million to be paid by the Riverside Police Department. Additionally, I order a complete review of all cases involving Officer Martinez, and that he be permanently banned from performing any police duties in the country." Helena closed her eyes for a moment, not out of relief, of justice served. The judge continued, "And one more thing. Let this case serve as an example. Fat phobia is prejudice. Abuse of power is a crime. And no one, absolutely no one, is above the law." Derek slumped in his chair, his face in his hands. His lawyer was already keeping the papers, knowing there was no possible recourse. When the session ended, journalists surrounded Helena as she left the court. Flashes, microphones, questions shouted from all sides. "Mrs. Ferreira, how do you feel?" Helena stopped, turned to the cameras, and for the first time in weeks smiled. "I feel relieved, not for me, but for the 16 other people that Derek Martinez humiliated and no one believed. Today they were heard. Today they were seen." A reporter shouted, "Do you have anything to say to other victims of police abuse?" Helena looked directly at the camera. "Don't accept it. Don't be silent. And don't believe them when they say you're too small to fight, because the truth is always bigger than the lie, and dignity always wins over arrogance." The crowd burst into applause. That night, Derek Martinez left the courthouse through the back door, trying to avoid cameras, but it was no use. His photo was already on every news site. Police officer convicted of fat phobia and abuse of power. Comments by the thousands, all saying the same thing. Finally, he got in the car, locked the doors, and just sat there in the dark, understanding for the first time in his life what it meant to lose everything. Badge, gone. Career, destroyed. Reputation, ruined. And the worst of all, he deserved it. Every second of it. Meanwhile, at a discreet restaurant in downtown Riverside, Helena and Richard ate dinner in silence. They didn't need to talk. After 18 years together, some victories were felt, not said. Richard held her hand across the table. "You were amazing today." Helena smiled, tired but at peace. "I just did what had to be done." He squeezed her hand affectionately. "No, you made history." And he was right. Because in the following days, Helena Ferreira's case became national headlines. Dozens of victims of police abuse began speaking out. Inspired by her courage, 3 similar lawsuits were opened in neighboring cities. The Riverside Police Department was forced to implement mandatory implicit bias training. And Derek Martinez? He never worked as a police officer again. He tried to get a job in private security, but no one wanted to hire the man who was a national symbol of abuse of power. Helena, on the other hand, received invitations to speak at universities, civil rights conferences, and even appeared in a documentary about social justice. But she didn't do any of this for fame. She did it because no one deserves to be humiliated for existing, and because at the end of the day the best revenge is not to destroy the oppressor. It's proving that you were always bigger than he imagined. 6 months after the trial, Riverside was a different city. The police department had undergone a complete overhaul. Mandatory training on implicit bias, prejudice, and appropriate use of authority. They were now held quarterly. Body cameras have become mandatory for all officers, and an anonymous hotline was created to report abuse, monitored directly by the chief deputy's office. Richard Ferreira not only kept his position, he became a national reference in police reform. He was invited to speak at conferences, train other departments, and even received a proposal to write a book on ethical leadership. But he always said the same thing in every interview. "None of this would have happened if my wife hadn't had the courage to fight." And Helena? She didn't stop. After her court victory, she founded an NGO called Dignidad en Paz, aimed at supporting victims of police abuse and discrimination. The organization offered free legal assistance, psychological counseling, and civil rights training. In just 6 months, I had already helped 43 people sue attackers and win. She has also been invited to speak at universities, law schools, and corporate events. Every time he went on stage, he started the same way. "My name is Helena Ferreira, and I was arrested for being fat." The phrase echoed, and then she told the story, every detail, every humiliation, every second of that July day. And it always ended with the same message. They thought they could silence me because I didn't fit their standards. But what they didn't know is that dignity has no size, and justice has no weight. The audience always rose to their feet in applause. Derek Martinez, on the other hand, has disappeared from public life. After losing his police license permanently, he tried to start over in another city. But the internet doesn't forget. Every time someone searched his name, the first result was the headline, "Former police officer convicted of fat phobia and abuse of authority." He tried working in construction. He was recognized and fired on the second day. Tried app delivery. Customers canceled orders when they saw his face. He changed cities 3 times in 6 months. Every place, same result. Nobody wanted association with him. He was toxic. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with abuse of power. And the worst part, he couldn't blame anyone but himself. One night, alone in a tiny apartment in a city he barely knew, Derek opened his laptop and typed in Helena Ferreira's name. He saw photos of her at events, smiling alongside people she had helped. You saw the articles about the NGO, watched the videos of the lectures, and for the first time in his life, Derek Martinez cried, not out of self-pity, but with real shame, ashamed of what he had been, of what he had done, of the lives he had hurt because he thought he could. He never publicly apologized. I knew it wouldn't help. Some things are unforgivable, only consequences. A year after the trial, Helena was invited to speak at the National Congress on police reform and social justice. Richard was in the front row, smiling with pride as she walked up to the podium. The room was packed. Politicians, activists, journalists, academics. Everyone there because they wanted to hear the woman who challenged the system and won. Helena adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. A year ago, I was just another woman shopping, and in 5 minutes, I became a criminal. Not because I committed a crime, but because someone with a badge decided that my body was evidence enough of guilt. She paused, letting the words sink in. But I was lucky. I had resources. I had a voice. I had a husband who was a chief deputy. And yet it took me weeks to get justice. Now imagine how many people are not that lucky. How many were humiliated, arrested, silenced, and never managed to fight back. The room was completely silent. That's why I'm here. Not to tell my story of victory, but to remember that as long as a person is judged by their body, their color, their clothes, their accent, their bank account, justice is not working, and we have a duty to fix that. The applause started slowly but grew into a standing ovation that lasted a full 3 minutes. And that night, back at the hotel, Helena was lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, when Richard came in with 2 cups of tea. "You were amazing today," he said, sitting next to her. Helena smiled. "Tired. I only told the truth." Richard took her hand. "You know that a lot has changed, right? Not just here, all over the country. There are people creating laws because of your case. There are police departments reformulating protocols. There are victims finding the courage to report." Helena turned to him, her eyes shining. "So it was worth it." Richard shook her hand. "It was always worth it." But 2 years later, Helena was in her office at the NGO when she received a letter. No sender, just a plain white envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside, a single handwritten sheet. The handwriting was shaky. "Mrs. Ferreira, I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know that, but I need you to know that I think about what I did every day, and if I could go back in time, I would never have done that to you, or with the other 17 people. I was a coward, and I paid for it. But the worst part wasn't losing my job. It was realizing that I spent years hurting innocent people and thinking I was right. Thanks for stopping me. Thank you for not letting me continue destroying lives. I don't expect an answer. I just wanted you to know. Derek Martinez." Helena read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the drawer. She didn't respond. Not because he didn't believe the letter, but because some things don't need an answer, just for recognition. Just today, Helena Ferreira is one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in the country. His NGO has helped more than 300 victims of police abuse get justice. She was on the cover of magazines, won awards, and even had a documentary produced about her life. But she still lives in the same house. He still shops at the same market. She still wears floral dresses and worn-out sneakers. Because Helena never needed to change who she was to prove her worth, she always knew. It was the world that needed to learn. BC War. And the lesson was not just about fat phobia. It was about dignity, about respect, about the danger of judging someone by what their eyes see, instead of what their heart feels. Because at the end of the day, true strength is never in the badge, the title, or the power. It's in the courage to stand up when they try to knock you down. And Helena Ferreira? She didn't just get up. She taught an entire nation to do the same. Cover. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. Because as long as there is injustice in the world, there will be stories of brave people who refuse to accept it, and we will be here to tell you each one of them. A moral of the story: the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, it's proving that you were always greater than they imagined. Because in the end, prejudice always loses, and dignity always wins.